Let's now start working on the Bankist website. And we're going to start by implementing smooth scrolling. And the functionality that we're going to implement now is when we click on this button, then it will smoothly scroll to this first section. Okay, so that's it. Simple effect. All that happens is one click, and the effect is that it smoothly scrolls here to this first section. So we're going to see two ways of doing this. First, one a bit more old school, which will allow me to show you a couple of interesting stuff. And then finally, I will show you the more modern way, which only works in super modern browsers. So let's start by selecting the button and the section that we want to scroll to. So that button is, it's this one, button scroll to. All right. And then the section is this one, section 1. So with this ID of section 1. So const button scroll to is document.query selector. All right. And now section 1 is document.query selector. And now it's the ID, so that's the hash, and then section --1. So that's the easy part. And now, as always, we need to start by adding an event listener to the button. .add event listener on click, and then our function. And let's actually give it the event. So in the first way that we're going to do, we need to first get the coordinates of the element that we want to scroll to. So let me show you how. So S1 coords, and that's section 1 dot get bounding client rect. All right, that sounds like a mouthful. It's actually pretty straightforward. Let me show it to you actually first. So when I click this, then we get this DOM rectangle. All right, and it has all of these properties. So the X position, which is measured from the left side, the Y position, which is measured from the top, and then the width of the element, the height, and then a lot of other properties. All right, and this element is probably not the best one to understand this. So let's get this rectangle for the button. So that's the element we just clicked. So e.target, remember, so e.target is essentially this element here. So the one that was clicked. And now get bounding client rectangle as well. And so let's take a look at that second one. So this 30 pixels here is the distance between the border here of the browser. All right. And then this Y is this distance from the top. Then we also have the width, which is this 112, the height. And yeah, here we also get the top, which is in this case similar to Y. Okay. But it isn't always, because when we scroll, then X and Y actually change. Let me show that to you. And if I click this again now, then let's take a look here. So you see that Y is now only 168 pixels. And so that's the distance between this element and the top of this viewport. So this bounding client rect is basically relative to this visible viewport. All right. And in fact, we can also get the current scroll position. So since we're talking about scrolling, let me show that to you as well. So current scroll, so that's the X and the Y positions, just so we see what we are looking at. So these values are at window, page X offset, and page Y offset. So let me just scroll somewhere here, click this, And so we get that the current scroll is at 0 from x, so there's no horizontal scroll, and vertically we already scrolled 290 pixels here at this point. So when we're at the very top, then these two values should both be 0. And so yeah, now they are. So basically this y coordinate here is the distance between the current position here of the viewport and the top of the page. So here at this line, for example, when we're here, if we get to scroll now, well, now we can't because we can't click on the button. But yeah, you get the point. So the distance, for example, here is now 421. So that means that from this very edge of the browser right now, all the way to the top of the page, it is 421 pixels. Okay? And sometimes that's very important to know in certain applications. And if you're even more curious, then since we're talking about coordinates and stuff, we can also read the height and the width of this viewport. So again, of this rectangle in which we can see the current portion of the page. So height and width of viewport, and they are at document.documentElement.client height, and then the same with client width. Client width. All right. So you see that this height here is 588 and the width 1067. So if I change this here, so this is kind of half now. So let's see what value we get now. And so now it is 276. Okay, and so that's because I decreased that visible box there. And so the height of the viewport is of course different. So let's reload here, click again. And so, yeah, here we get all kinds of interesting information about coordinates, scrolling, and dimensions of the viewport. All right. But anyway, the goal of actually getting these coordinates is because we need them to scroll to this first section here. All right. So basically, we need these coordinates here to tell JavaScript where it should scroll to. So let's now do that, actually. So scrolling, and we use window.scroll to. Okay, so that's a global function that's available on the window object. And here the first argument is the left position. And so that is at S1 chords. And let's take a look here. So this is the one. Oh, now it's gone. So we are interested here in this left value right now. So it is 0, and that's good because we don't want any horizontal scroll. Then for the second one, we're going to be interested in the top, which is, again, the position from the top of the viewport. So the section starts here, so it's basically these 270 pixels right there. Okay. So left and S1 chords dot top. So let's give it some more space and let's try it. And indeed, now it worked. So we are now here at the top of section 1. Okay. And so that's because the top was at 730 pixels. And so that's the distance that was scrolled. However, watch what happens when I click again. So now it doesn't really work, does it? Well, that's because this top here that we specified is always relative to the viewport, but not to the document. So not to the top of the page, basically. Right? So let me show it to you again. So it works when we are here. All right? And that's because this Y position here, which is the same as this top, is 429. which is basically the distance between this point and this point. Okay? But if we're doing it here, then the distance between the line and the top of the viewport here is a lot less. So it's only like 200 or something. So let's see. It is only, actually it's only 112. Well, that doesn't make sense. Well, actually it's this one. So it's only 333. All right. And so basically it only scrolled to position 333. While in fact, we wanted to scroll all the way to here, which was at something like, so it was at 492, or actually at 713. Okay, so I know it's all a little bit confusing, and in order to really understand all of these numbers, you have to play around with this a lot by yourself. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to make sense of this. But the solution to this problem is to simply add the current scroll position to the top value here. And with this, we will then determine the position of this section here, not relative to the viewport, so to the top of this browser window here, but instead to the top of the page. Okay? So again, the position of this section here is always this top, which is from here to the viewport, plus the current scroll position. And so that's the distance from here all the way to the top. Okay, so let's add that here. And again, to really make sense of all I'm saying here, please play around with this a lot by yourself. Okay, so page Y offset. And here it should actually also be window. And then we also, just for the sake of completeness, add it here as well. So window dot page X offset. Okay, so let's see if it still works here, and it does. And now let's try it from somewhere else, like here, and now it works. Now it goes to the correct place, and so by doing this here, we basically determined the absolute position of this element relative to the document, so to the entire page. And that's important to note. So if you need that, then this is how you calculate it. So again, the current position plus the current scroll. All right. Now we can even make this better. So dot scroll to again, because there is a way of making this animation nice and smooth. And this works by passing in an object now instead of just one argument. So let's get these two, and then let's comment all of this out. And so the properties that we need to specify are the left. So this is the left. This is the top. And so this is actually called top. And then we also have a property called behavior. And so here we can now specify smooth. All right. So to implement smooth scrolling like this, we need to specify an object with the left, top, and behavior properties. So let's try it out. And it works. Great. So that is a lot better, isn't it? And again, it also is going to work from this position. And the browser automatically figures out the speed it should go to make this look really nice. All right. So this is kind of the old school way still of doing it. So manually calculating all of these values here and then saying that we want to scroll to this position. All right. But there is a more modern way, and it works like this. We simply take the element that we want to scroll to, and that is section 1. And on that, we call scroll into view. And then we pass in an object and specify, again, behavior, and set it to smooth. And that's actually it. Then we don't need any of this. Okay, let me prove it to you. And it works just the same. So without any of these weird calculations here with these weird positions and all of that, it's all unnecessary if we are able to use this function here. And again, this only works in modern browsers, but if you only need to support these, then you are 100% fine using only this method. But I think it was still a good idea to show you all of these different numbers here. So like calculating the current scroll positions or the current window positions and sizes, and also all the sizes of the elements that we can get using this function. And by the way, these client height and width here are not counting with the scroll bars. It's just the dimensions of the viewport that are actually available for the content. And of course, that excludes any scroll bars.